The Trapper. You're brand new to DBD and haven't yet purchased any of the DLC killers, so you went with the Trapper as your starting killer. However, after you get absolutely destroyed time and time again, you'll eventually get bored of the Trapper and move on to either another killer or just switch sides completely and become a survivor main instead. The Wraith. You absolutely love the hit and run playstyle and often rely on perks like Sloppy Butcher and Nurse's Call-In, along with indoor maps. You do hate committing to chases or trying to mind game pallets, which is exactly why the hit and run playstyle works perfectly for you. The Hillbilly. You have thousands of hours in Hillbilly alone and refuse to ever go for an M1. Every single hit you get on a survivor must be a hit with the chainsaw. You love doubling back and mind gaming at every single loop possible with the chainsaw, as you find those chainsaw hits around loops to be extremely satisfying to pull off. You're definitely a really great killer and have a crazy amount of experience with Hillbilly due to the insane amount of hours that you've put in. The Nurse. You 4K every single game you play, and you're also the kind of player that enjoys playing all of their single player games on the easiest setting. You play the Call of Duty campaigns on recruit difficulty and play Minecraft on peaceful mode, and this also translates over to when you play DBD. You absolutely hate a challenge, and this is exactly why you went with the Nurse. The thought of mind gaming survivors around tiles just doesn't really appeal to you, and you'd much rather just blink and hit over and over. So for this reason, the Nurse is the only killer that you ever play in DBD. The Huntress. Much like the Hillbilly mains, you're an extremely skilled and experienced killer who is very dedicated to your main. Your favorite perks are aura reading perks such as Barbecue and Chili and Lethal Pursuer, and you always bring the perk Iron Maiden to make sure you can reload at lockers even quicker. You always go for those crazy hatchet hits across the map, which to you is by far the most satisfying thing in this entire game. The Hooked on You outfit is your favorite outfit and the outfit that you use the majority of the time. You do win the vast majority of your games, and it's really rare that any survivors will escape at all, not even through the hatch. Your precise aim and experience make you a very difficult killer to face for any survivor main. Myers. You're a huge fan of the Halloween series and find Myers to be the most appealing horror movie villain of all time. You always use the hospital gown cosmetic, and you're a very happy Myers main now that he's finally received a buff. Your favorite add-ons to use are the Tombstone add-ons, along with either one of the green add-ons that increase the stalking speed. One thing that annoys you about Myers is just how difficult it was to get the Evil Incarnate achievement, where you have to Mori all 4 survivors with your power. You eventually did get it, but it was extremely frustrating, and the survivors jumping into the lockers made it feel like it was pretty much impossible to achieve. Overall, you're a pretty decent killer, definitely not amazing, but experienced enough to give most survivors a hard time when playing against you. The Hag. Your main is one of the least popular killers in the entire game, and for good reason. She's a very slow and boring killer for most players to play, due to the amount of setup and patience needed to play her efficiently. Your favorite perk is Corrupt Intervention due to the amount of time that it buys, which allows you to set up your traps. You always make sure to set tons of traps around basement, as you're well aware an early down in the basement can win games on its own. Even though Hag is your main, you do play other killers as well as Hag. After all, playing Hag alone the entire time would be enough to drive anyone insane. The Doctor. Most Doctor mains seem to be pretty new to the game and don't really know what they're doing. They'll spam both the Shock Therapy and Static Blast over and over, whilst also overcommitting to long chases with the survivors. Your stubbornness, which prevents you from dropping chase with the survivors, combined with your lack of experience, makes playing killer extremely difficult for you, with the majority of your games ending in a 4-man escape for the survivors. Your cosmetic of choice is either the default outfit or the Plague Doctor outfit. Both of these outfits seem to be a very common choice amongst Doctor mains. Leatherface. You used to be a baby killer that had no idea what you were doing. However, after being took on 5-gen chases over and over by survivors, your dedication to improving as killer has finally paid off, and you're now an intimidating killer for any survivor. You become great at using your chainsaw to not only down survivors, but also burn through the pallets, creating huge dead zones, which can help you out later on in the game. Your favorite perk by far is the perk Bamboozle. Even though it does make you somewhat predictable, it allows you to end chases much faster and helps you out a lot with achieving the 4K. Freddy. You're really excited about the upcoming Freddy rework and are desperately hoping that it somewhat brings him back to his former glory. Even though the dream pallets exist, you never use them and instead opt for using the default dream snares, since they do give you some anti-loop to use against the survivors whilst in chase. You've seen a couple of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but you're by no means a huge fan of the franchise. You just play Freddy since he's an easy killer to play and doesn't have a high learning curve. Even though Freddy has been one of the weakest killers in the entire game for a while now, you still do enjoy playing as him, and you're just really looking forward to that upcoming Freddy rework. The Pig. Your 2 favorite things in Dead by Daylight are survivors who boot the snoot and head popping survivors with your reverse bear traps. Even though it is extremely rare for you to ever see the timer running out, resulting in a head pop, it is still really rewarding when it does happen. You're also a huge fan of the Saw series, and the original Saw is your favorite of the bunch. Although this alone isn't why you play the pig, you're also a big fan of how her powers work in-game, and find her to be a very enjoyable killer to play as overall, despite how weak she is. You're by no means a great killer, but you do have a solid idea of what you're doing. You absolutely love the perk Save the Best for Last, and there's been many times where this perk alone has won the game for you. The Clown. You absolutely love proxy camping hooks and tunneling down survivors. You tried to justify this by saying Clown is one of the weakest killers in the entire game, so it is warranted. You always tell people just how much you hated the Clown's supposed buff a couple of years back, and as a result you almost never use his haze bottles, as you find them to be a waste overall, and much more inferior to the regular bottles that slow down the survivors. Overall, you're not that great at the game and you absolutely hate god palettes. One thing that you do have going for you is the fact that your main has some great cosmetics, and there's definitely plenty of choice when it comes to different outfits for the Clown. The Spirit. You have a great headset and love playing DBD on autopilot. You also make sure to turn on that spatial sound just to make sure you hear absolutely everything. You did consider maining the Nurse before choosing to main the Spirit, but realized you just had too much self-respect for yourself. Then you decided to order an expensive headset off Amazon and become a Spirit main instead. You only play the Spirit and no other killers, and as a result you're extremely experienced with the Spirit, and the vast majority of your games end with a 4K. The Legion. You use your frenzy every single chance you get and love making survivors mend up. Your favorite thing about playing Legion is the rare scenario where you put all 4 survivors into the deep wound status effect with a single frenzy, then following up with an insta-down. Even though there's a ton of options when it comes to cosmetics, I do have a question for you Legion mains out there. Why no Bunny Legion? Bunny Legion is my favorite cosmetic in the entire game, yet it's one that I never see used, despite Legion being somewhat of a common killer to see in game. Sure, it might make you taller, resulting in being able to be seen more easily by survivors over certain loops, but I'm sure that we'd all agree that the Bunny Legion cosmetic has to be one of, if not the best cosmetic in the entire game. So my question for you Legion mains is, why do you never use it? You also always seem to respect pallets, especially whenever you're in your frenzy, and the fact that Legion remains one of the weakest killers in the entire game doesn't bother you. In fact, you do love the challenge of using one of the weaker killers. The Plague. For some reason you always commit to survivors immediately after vomiting on them, even though it would be much more beneficial to vomit on them and then leave in most scenarios. You love whenever you get that one survivor that just keeps on cleansing over and over, allowing you to spend the majority of the game with your power, resulting in getting quick downs against the survivors. Even though there's games where this never happens, there's also a decent amount of games where you do get that one cleansing survivor, which brings you so much joy to see. You are still mad about the fact that she doesn't have any amazing cosmetics, but you love the gumball weapon and make sure that you always use it in all of your games. Ghostface. The main reason that you main Ghostface is for the ability to teabag. There's nothing more satisfying than finally catching that one teabagging survivor and then giving them some karma. Default Ghostface players are some of the worst and least experienced players you'll ever see. These Ghostface players are typically just fans of the Scream franchise and don't have that many hours in DBD. But on the flip side of that, the Devilface and Derpface players are some of the sweatiest and most intimidating killers to go up against. These Ghostface players always seem to have survivors 99'd and insta-down them whenever they get spotted out in the open. Demogorgon. You absolutely love Stranger Things and you've seen every single episode multiple times over, and you get so excited whenever you come across Steves and Nancy's in your lobbies. Much like the pig mains, your favorite perk is the perk Save the Best for Last, and even though you may change up your other 3 perks, Save the Best for Last always has a permanent place in your builds. The Owner. Nothing annoys you more than survivors who play it super safe by pre-dropping pallets at the start of the game. You're just desperate to get some blood to help activate your power, and here they are pre-throwing every single pallet. You love the perk Sloppy Butcher since it keeps survivors injured slightly longer, giving you more time to collect the blood orbs and activate your power. You're an experienced killer overall and great at using the Oni's power. However, you do struggle against very experienced survivors with efficient movement, as they can make it extremely awkward for you to get that insta-down. The Death Slinger. You don't have much experience in DBD. In fact, you don't even like the game that much. You just decided to give it a try after hearing there's a killer with a gun in the game. Even though you have limited experience in DBD, you have an absolute ton of experience in many different FPS games. This combined with your great aim make you an extremely intimidating killer to face for any survivor main, despite your limited experience in Dead by Daylight. Pyramid Head. Tunneling is your favorite part about Dead by Daylight, and Pyramid Head's power allows you to easily get around perks like Decisive Strike and Off the Record, making him a perfect choice for you. You love getting hits in the power, especially through walls, as you find this extremely satisfying, and for this reason you sometimes use the perk I'm All Ears to help you out with getting those hits when line of sight is blocked. You're also a big fan of the Silent Hill franchise, and you had the Silent Hill 2 remake on pre-order. You did enjoy it, however, you do prefer the original Silent Hill 2 to the new remake. The Blight. Your favorite drink is Monster Energy, and you go through several cans per day to fuel yourself for hours and hours of Blight gameplay. You have over thousands of hours in Dead by Daylight and manage to end all of your chases in just seconds. You enjoy doing the DPI flicks with your mouse, and always make sure to use a full gen regression build with perks like Pain Res and Grim Embrace just to make sure that no survivors ever escape any of your games. The Twins. The Twins are the only killer in DBD that I'm convinced no one mains. In fact, do they even exist anymore? I'm pretty sure I haven't faced any Twins players since like 2022, and they could probably remove the Twins from the game entirely and it would take months for anyone to even notice. From what I remember, Twins mains used to love slugging, sometimes even refuse to hook survivors at all, resulting in half of their games with all 4 survivors bleeding out. However, I can't even remember the last time I went up against the Twins, so I'm not sure if they even exist in 2025. The Trickster. You're a huge fan of K-pop, and that's the main reason why you enjoy maining Trickster in DBD. Your favorite add-on is the Ricochet add-on. This makes things so much easier, especially on those indoor maps. You're still excited about the buff that Trickster received, and now find playing him so much easier and so much more enjoyable, making 4Ks much more common in your killer games. Nemesis. Resident Evil 3 is one of your favorite games of all time, so you just had to make sure that you main Nemesis in DBD, and you still remain hopeful that one day they'll bring his original PS1 outfit into the game. You love using his tentacle power and are pretty good at using it as well, resulting in you usually getting to tier 3 very quickly in your games. However, you aren't a big fan of the zombies, as they often get stuck and glitched out, and overall they just aren't as useful as you'd want them to be. Pinhead. The reason you main Pinhead is purely due to that one voice line he has. You find this hilarious and always giggle to yourself whenever he says it. You've never seen the Hellraiser movies, so you definitely don't play Pinhead because you're familiar with the franchise. You're a pretty solid killer overall and love using the combo of both Ruin and Undying, and realize just how strong and annoying for survivors Ruin can be during the chain hunt. You don't go out of your way to tunnel, but you're definitely not against tunneling or even proxy camping when the time is right to do so. The Artist. One thing you really hate about the Artist is when survivors move away to a different tile whilst you're setting up your birds at a loop during a chase. Despite this, however, you still find Artist a very fun and rewarding killer to play as overall. You spam your power constantly at any given opportunity, not only during chase but also across the map to defend your generators. And even though Artist is your main, you do enjoy playing several other killers as well. Onre. You're a huge fan of the Ring movies and have seen them all, but you do much prefer the Japanese movie to the English one. Your favorite perk is the perk Sloppy Butcher, and much like Wraith mains, the hit and run playstyle is one that you often use in your games. However, you aren't always against committing to a chase with a survivor. You spam your power all the time in hopes that you can eventually get a survivor condemned. This rarely happens, but it is always extremely satisfying and rewarding whenever it does happen, and you better believe you're going to be fully committed to any survivor that does happen to get condemned. The Dredge. You're a huge fan of horror and you love maining Dredge due to his Nightfall ability, since you can catch so many survivors off guard, jump scaring them whilst also getting an easy M1. You're also a fan of lockers, and your cosmetic of choice is either the Iron Maiden skin or the Marie skin. You always mind game with your power at any short loops, and you just love when the survivor stands there waiting for you to teleport, only for you to cancel your power and then M1 the survivor. Wesker. You're a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise and love seeing other survivors from the Resident Evil franchise in your lobby. You love his voice lines, especially the 7 minutes voice line, and you always repeat this over and over. You're great at using Wesker's power and love getting the survivors around different loops. You find it hilarious anytime you throw a survivor across the map, or even throwing them into another survivor, resulting in both survivors being put into the deep wound status effect. Even though you love having fun, you always make sure you play to win, and you will always have a full gen regression build just to make things that much more difficult for the survivors to escape. The Knight. You aren't a big fan of the Knight's power, but you absolutely love his design, and this is the main reason that you main the Knight. You're a big fan of the Dark Souls and other Souls-like games, so you figured that it was only fitting that you main the Knight in DBD. You aren't an amazing killer, and you're often pretty predictable during chase with the survivors, but you're decent enough to have a fun time overall. The Skull Merchant. The main reason why you play the Skull Merchant is to annoy as many survivors as possible, as you're well aware just how many survivors hate playing against her. You actually preferred using her a while ago, back when it was much easier to 3-gen, and you could hold survivors hostage for up to an hour with a good 3-gen. Even though she's been nerfed, you do still love using her just because of how many survivors still hate playing against her. The Singularity. You love maining the Singularity because it's a killer that really isn't popular. You love standing out from the crowd and being different from the rest. You also aren't sure why more people don't play as a Singularity. You think there are way stronger killer than what everyone else thinks, but you also really enjoy the fact they're a killer that isn't commonly used. Alien. You're a hardcore fan of the Alien franchise and have seen every single Alien movie multiple times. Alien is by far your favorite collaboration DBD has ever done, and as a result, you will play Alien whenever you're playing killer. You absolutely love facing Ripley players, even though it's something that rarely happens since Ripley has to be one of the least common survivors, but that just makes it even more exciting for you when it finally does happen. The Blighted cosmetic is your favorite skin, even though it's not from any of the Alien movies. You just love how much it stands out compared to the other cosmetics. Chucky. You love watching survivors suffer, and even though Chucky has recently been nerfed, survivors still hate playing against him more than ever. Survivors disconnecting or giving up on first hook is something that is extremely common in your killer games, and something that brings you a lot of joy to see. Your cosmetic of choice is either the default or the prestige outfit. You refuse to spend any more money on Chucky since you already had to buy the killer with auric cells. The Unknown. You're a very experienced killer with many hours in the game. You constantly spam your power and find it extremely satisfying hitting survivors with your power across the map. You also find it extremely rewarding teleporting right next to a survivor during the chase, jump scaring them whilst also getting an easy M1 at the same time. Overall, you love the Unknown, but definitely wish they had more cosmetics to choose from. Vecna. You're a huge fan of Dungeons & Dragons, and you are extremely surprised to see them add a Dungeons & Dragons chapter into DBD. Other than the fact you're a fan of the franchise, you also enjoy maining Vecna due to the amount of powers you have at your disposal. You're a decent killer overall and can end the chases pretty quickly thanks to your Mage Hand and Flight of the Damned abilities. The only thing that you dislike about Vecna is the lack of cosmetics that he has in the game, something that you hope will get better over time. However, despite this, you're still a huge fan of Vecna and the Dungeons & Dragons chapter overall. Dracula. You played almost all of the Castlevania games and you now main Dracula in DBD. You're a huge fan of the bat form as well as the vampire form, although you definitely don't use the wolf form as much as the other two. His true form outfit from the most recent Rift is not only your favorite cosmetic for Dracula, but also your favorite cosmetic in the entire game, the Houndmaster. Despite being the newest killer added to DBD at the time of recording this video, Houndmaster players are somewhat rare to come across in-game, even though the newest killer is usually a popular choice for killer mains, since everyone usually likes trying out the killer when they first get released. However, the few Houndmaster mains that do exist definitely prefer dogs to cats. They're often very reliant on hitting survivors with the dog around different loops, even if this often ends with the survivors dropping the pallet on the dog, or even the dog just missing the attack entirely. But that is going to be it for what your killer main says about you, so feel free to let me know in the comments if I was right or wrong about your main, and also let me know if there was anything that I've missed. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you all in the next one.